What's going on, everyone? So, a team that the Los Angeles Lakers should definitely keep an eye out for are the Toronto Raptors. The Toronto Raptors really kind of put themselves in this awkward position with the Brandon Ingram situation. I mean, even Rich Paul was like, dude, we wouldn't have gotten like money in the bank, baby, but we would have gotten that anywhere else, right? It was just kind of Toronto kind of put themselves in this Hail Mary. NBA execs are already talked about it, right? It's already being painted as like, hey, this was a desperation move by Usai Ujiri, and maybe it works out, but probably not. They're paying him quite a bit of money and could end up putting them in a tough spot. Obviously, they recently hired Bobby Webster to kind of take over at the helm for the Toronto Raptors. And, Lakers have several needs that could be addressed that Toronto, if they're looking to kind of retool things and get off of guys and clear some salary, especially with Brandon Ingram's contract, they may need to do that, especially guys like Scotty Barnes and whatnot. There is the potential the Lakers could really come in and kind of actually be an organization that a team like the Toronto Raptors really looks to go and trade with, right? You could have the Toronto Raptors calling the Lakers once we get close to the trade deadline, because the Lakers have like 40 plus million in expiring contracts that Toronto might just say like, hey man, like just take some of these guys from us, just so that way they can retool, especially with an organization that's in the middle of kind of this transition period. See that a lot. You see kind of new GMs come in, kind of take losses and eat some crow from the previous GM just to kind of get things in order, so that way they can kind of retool, reshape, and do the things that they need to do. So Toronto might be an organization that the Lakers can kind of go to, look to maybe make some trades and make some moves for, without having to break the bank and sell the farm, because it's kind of like, hey, you guys need to get off of some salary, right? And there's not a lot of teams that have 60 million in expiring contracts to kind of help you in that regard. Now that doesn't mean if you're the Lakers you just get all crazy and it's like, yeah, you take this guy, well, just give us whatever. But you look at the Toronto Raptors and they do have some players that really could make some sense. Not a Brandon Ingram. Stay away from Brandon Ingram at 40 plus million. I'd love Jakob Poeltl, but like, I don't think him and, DeAndre Ayton really make sense as like a starting, front court. You could argue because DeAndre Ayton can spread the floor. Maybe if he can kind of spread it enough to the 3-point range, but even then I think it'd be a little awkward, and I'm sure Jakob Poeltl's not going to want to come off the bench, but I mean, you want to talk about that defensive kind of center that could just bring some toughness and defend on the inside and interior, right? I would love to have a Jakob Poeltl, right? Just kind of be that anchor. In a perfect world, he's coming off the bench in place of a DeAndre Ayton, and you kind of just have those two guys and maybe even at times play those two and kind of work it out. But again, Brandon Ingram I'd stay away from. Emmanuel Quickly I'd stay away from. Brandon Ingram I'd stay away from. Obviously they're not going to trade guys like Scotty Barnes, but you start getting into guys like, RJ Barrett. He's a guy that could slot in 2 or 3 that I wouldn't hate to have, right? Like a guy that can create his own shot, shoot the basketball, play on ball, play off ball. Kind of just seems like a guy that's just needs to go to a new place. Plus, Toronto's been shopping him and have at least had the intentions before, with Ujiri, where, maybe that's changed. But he was a guy that they at least had interest in potentially trading at some point, right? So he's a guy that also contract-wise kind of lines up to what the Lakers are looking for. He's young to where he could kind of be a piece, not just now, but the long term. I mean, talk about a guy that's currently 25 years old, 6'6", 6'7", slot in at your 2, slot in at your 3, give you some scoring ability. I mean, I think he kind of makes a little more sense alongside Luka than even Austin Reeves does. Like, I just fit-wise, whoever you think is better, right? I just think RJ Barrett kind of, I think he fits that better. He's better defensively. He's not really like known as this like super great defensive stopper, but he is a guy that can get after it defensively when he's bought in and engaged. And maybe on a team like the Lakers, he might be more bought in and engaged. Right? He's got more size, but he has the offensive ability where you can just give him the basketball and he can just go to work. He can make some plays for others, rebound the basketball, but he also can play off ball, catch a shoot. He's a better 3-point shooter, right? Like, so again, he's a guy that I do think has that potential, can make some sense. Abaji is another guy who's young, 25 years old. Talk about a guy that's, that 6'5", 6'6", versatile, slot in 2 and 3, but defend 1 through 3 for you. Give you some defensive versatility. Give you some guys, right? Could you maybe work something out where you can get both? Or maybe you're bringing in an RJ Barrett and I mean, maybe he's slotting in at your 3 and you're bringing in an Abaji slotting in at your 2. And now you have just kind of that athleticism, that defense and that versatility there, the scoring, the shooting, all of those things. Abaji, I think, is a guy, I've talked about him on several occasions as a guy that could kind of come in, play a role for the Lakers, would be cheap. I don't think you'd have to sell the farm to go get. RJ Barrett would probably be, I don't know how much they'd be willing to kind of just give him up for, right? I would imagine that they probably want some assets, but it also depends on the market. Like how many teams need an RJ Barrett for one, how many teams are willing to pony up multiple firsts and stuff for an RJ Barrett. And again, expiring contracts, right? If Toronto gets to that position, gets in that spot where it's like, hey, like we just kind of need to clear salary, and the only options that we have are taking on more salary or salary period, right? Like that might give the Lakers kind of a leg up on some of these other teams, right? Because, if an RJ Barrett becomes available, there are going to be other teams that would like him and maybe throw their hat in the ring for him. But the Lakers kind of advantage point, and I think you're going to see this regardless, this obviously is the expiring contracts. I just think are going to have a ton of value. Talked about on several occasions, they're appreciating assets. And the more and more that we kind of move into and get closer to the trade deadline, the more that those expiring contracts are going to carry that weight to where teams, like I mentioned, a team like Toronto, I could see them picking up the phone and calling the Lakers and hitting up Rob and being like, hey, Rob, what do you think? How do you feel? What are your thoughts? We'd really love to kind of clear the deck here a little bit. Let's try to work on a trade that makes sense for all parties, right? Maybe you're throwing in, Dalton Connect, like, hey, we're taking on the salary, we're taking long term. Here's Dalton Connect for the services. You're throwing in pick swaps or whatever, right? Again, it's got to make sense for the Lakers too, right? And you have to factor in if it is something where like you're trying to clear salary, that has to factor in. That is a benefit that you're gaining that we're not. And also you got to keep in mind the Lakers want to preserve cap space for 2027. So any type of moves or trades that they make is probably going to have that in mind, right? They're not going to just be running to the door to go and take on a bunch of long-term salary. But again, I look at the Toronto Raptors. I mean, you can even go even further into like this roster. Just depends on like what would they be willing to give up. Like, are they willing to trade a Grady Dick, right? Maybe, especially if they really kind of want to revamp and retool things and kind of tear this down. Also, like, where does he kind of slot in for them, right? Because you got to think right now it's probably quickly Barrett, Ingram, Scotty Barnes, and then a Jakob. Right? So everyone else is going to be kind of playing a bench role, 6-man role, so on and so forth. So they have several guys that, they're probably going to have to make some decisions on, that they're probably going to, get some guys that might start getting an itch, might go like, hey, you know what? Like, let's make a move and get off of these guys. Cause I mean, you go down the list of guys, right? They got Jacoby Walter, 20-year-old 6'5" guy that I imagine that they're going to want to have some plays. I think it also depends, before I kind of continue going into these players, I also think it's going to depend on like where they are, right? Because there is, especially in the Eastern Conference, right? There is a version of this Toronto team that's really good. Right? I mean, you're talking about, Emmanuel Quickley. I mean, I think it would be better if they had kind of more of a traditional point guard, right? Somebody like a Chris Paul, I think would be beautiful with this team. Where it's like you let Scotty Barnes, Brandon Ingram, and RJ Barrett kind of be themselves, and you just have that guy that's just making sure everyone eats, right? Running some pick and roll with Jakob and stuff like that, kind of setting guys up, putting guys in position, right? That's kind of where I lean towards with the Toronto team. But there is a version of this, right? Again, where you have Quickly, you have, RJ Barrett, right? You have Brandon Ingram. You have like this size, this length, the versatility defensively, right? Brandon Ingram, not really been, absolute clamps defensively, but he is a guy that can get after it when he wants to. He's got the size, the length, and the ability to, if he's really bought and engaged. Scotty Barnes could be that too. But there's also concerns about like, Scotty Barnes is best with the ball in his hands, kind of doing his thing, being the offensive focal point. He really thrived when he was kind of the guy for them. Brandon Ingram is best with the ball in his hands and letting him kind of be a scorer. Okay, so he's your secondary scorer. Is he your first guy? Is he your second guy alongside Scotty Barnes? Okay, well, RJ Barrett. So is RJ Barrett, is he like your third guy? But again, he's kind of a guy that, yes, he can play off ball and score off ball, but you want to kind of let him cook at times too and give him the basketball, kind of let him go to work at times too. And then Emmanuel quickly is that, downhill, get to the basket, apply the rim pressure, go and get buckets. Like defensively, there's a version of this team that could be really good. Offensively, there's a version of this team that could be really good. And you're in the Eastern Conference where it's like, as long as you're like half decent, you're probably, a top 5 or 6 seed in the Eastern Conference. So again, this is a team that could, if they're pretty decent, might just go, hey, let's kind of see how this plays out. Let's say, if they're the 6th seed and they got a pretty good cushion on the 6th seed, they could maybe look at it and just go, hey, you know what? Maybe we have an Indiana level run where we get to the playoffs, everyone's healthy, and we're able to kind of, make some noise. That's the other thing too, is health. Like guys with Brandon Ingram and stuff, like is if he's able to stay healthy, right? Like, could they maybe do some noise and kind of work some stuff out? I don't know. They're a really interesting team, all right, in both a good and bad way. Like, I could see this being a total disaster and they're just an absolute mess. And I could see this actually being hey, this team's actually pretty good, right? Like this team, they could maybe make some noise in a playoff run. But again, you basically have what I think the consensus is what Toronto's starting unit's going to be. Then from there, like I said, Abaji is a guy that's probably coming off the bench. Grady Dick is a guy probably coming off the bench. They have, Jamison Battle, who is a guy 6'7", versatile forward, 24 years old, right? They have a lot of just young guys that, they don't have to rush to go trade. They don't have to hurry to go make a move, but guys that, they might want to hey, let's kind of combine or again, if you're clearing some salary, maybe it's like, hey, we throw in a Battle, right? Like throw in a guy, that can kind of help or to match salaries or whatever to kind of dump it out, right? We're helping you clear the deck here a little bit. Give us one of these young guys to kind of, throw in because they're not getting playing time or they're not that. And, we're going to need kind of cheap talent the next, year or two as we're kind of getting in and trying to preserve cap space and stuff like that. Could make some sense for a team like the Lakers. It's just, again, what would Toronto be looking for in that type of trade? Like, because again, if they're like, okay, well, we'll give you, Abaji and an RJ Barrett, but we want Reeves and a first and Rui and all this other, it's like, no, like it doesn't make sense, right? It's got to make sense, right? But, you could, even like a Rui, like if you were to give up a Rui, right? Like let's say you were to get an RJ Barrett, like you could give up a Rui, like they could slot Rui. Rui could be their 3 and just move Brandon Ingram to the 2, like have Ingram play the 2, Rui play the 3, right? Or with Scotty Barnes and his versatility and stuff. You could probably slot in Scotty at the 3, and allow him to be versatile. He's 6'7", 6'8", so you have Scotty Barnes, you have Brandon Ingram, right? Like you could have kind of that, and then maybe put Rui at his natural position of the 4 for them and kind of have like a quickly, which also would make more sense because Rui also has been he's really done a great job of adapting to just being an off-ball guy, catch and shoot 3 guy. So especially if you have like quickly, Ingram and Scotty Barnes, it might make more sense for them to have a guy like Rui that can just catch and shoot and give you 43% from 3-point range, where RJ Barrett kind of gives you that versatility that the Lakers would be looking for. Again, and you're throwing in, maybe they're throwing in, like I said, an Abaji or whatever, you're working out that type of trade, and can you maybe throw in a young guy, right? But again, if it's like, oh, we want a first and 3 pick swaps and all this other stuff, it is like, no, like you're not taking into account the expiring contracts. And also, is that something that they want to do? They kind of, because the thing is, too, is how long is Scotty Barnes going to want to be, a bad basketball team? Right? At some point, Scotty Barnes is probably going to be like, all right, come on, like we need to do something. So I'm also kind of hopeful that maybe Scotty Barnes will kind of, press the issue a little bit. Kind of, hey, we need to figure something out here. Especially if Toronto's not great. Like if they're a play-in team in the East, it's like, dude, we're in the Eastern Conference. It's supposed to be a bad conference and we're a play-in team, right? Like we need to retool here. He starts getting a little itchy. all of a sudden that kind of, now you kind of get the Toronto Raptors front office going like, all right, well, we don't want to risk losing him or him, getting a little itchy and wanting out or something, right? Like, or, he just kind of doesn't want to do a new extension or something like that. Now it just puts us in a tough spot. You want to, you want to keep your star happy. And Scotty Barnes is a guy that has the potential to be very good for that team and be one of the premier guys in this league potentially. But you also need to put him in a position to have success. So I'm hoping he kind of presses the issue a little bit as we move into the season. But keep an eye on the Toronto Raptors. But anyway, as always, this is a discussion. I pass the question to you. Let me know your thoughts and opinions down in the comments. That being said, if you haven't liked this video, hit that like button. Else if not, if you enjoyed these types of videos, truly appreciate it. Not subscribe channel, hit that subscribe button. Turn on the bell notifications. Appreciate y'all. See you in the next one. Thank you.